Welcome to the World Today. I am Amarachi Ubani. The number of casualties might be on the rise, but Israel is not backing down from its conflict in Gaza. So far, more than 100 Palestinians were said to have been killed after Israel intensified its bombardment of Gaza overnight and warned of a long conflict ahead. Gaza's only power plant caught fire as Israel carried out a total of 60 airstrikes targeting sites associated with Hamas, the Islamist group which controls Gaza. Sadly, UN staff members are said to be among those killed, but an Israeli military spokesperson signaled that these strikes are proof of a gradual increase in the pressure on Hamas.
With each passing day, the casualties continue to escalate, more on the part of the Palestinians than on the part of Israel. However, the ground and air offensives in the Gaza Strip continue. Just this morning, 17 Palestinians were killed in an Israeli strike on southern Gazan city of Khan Yunis as the army pounded the coastal enclave. Residents rushed to the scene of the house where the bodies of several people were pulled out of the rubble, among them children. In summary, health officials say at least 30 people were killed in Israeli strikes from air, sea, and land today alone. However, the calls for truce keep coming in from every angle.
It is time for an immediate, unconditional humanitarian ceasefire. In the name of humanity, the violence must stop. The fighting has claimed well over 1,000 Palestinian lives, most of them civilians, hundreds of them children. Hamas rocket fire has claimed the lives of 3 Israeli civilians.
Noting that Israel's large-scale offensive on Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip since July 8 has left more than 6,000 Palestinians injured, the UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon urged both sides to stop the conflicts.
Israelis and Palestinians have a responsibility to stop the fighting now, to start the dialogue now, and to address the root causes that will finally break the endless cycles of senseless suffering. That means securing peace through mutual respect, an end to the economic strangulation of Gaza, and nearly half-century of occupation.
He said he was deeply disappointed at the dangerous hostilities resuming on Sunday in Gaza, stressing that to end the fighting in the region hinged on political wills of both sides. Israel's military has continued to pound targets in the Gaza Strip after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said his country needed to be prepared for a long conflict in the Palestinian enclave. The Al-Shoruk building that houses several media production companies was among the ones that took a hit during the strikes. Earlier, an Israeli aircraft fired a missile at Hania's house early, causing damage but no casualties. An Israeli military spokeswoman had no information on the reports but was checking for details. Israel launched its Gaza offensive on July 8, saying its aim was to halt rocket attacks by Hamas and its allies. It later ordered a land invasion to find and destroy the warren of Hamas tunnels that crisscrosses the border area.
Well, the VOA's Scott Bob joins me now via telephone. He's been in the Gaza Strip monitoring the situation on ground. Scott, thank you for joining us on The World Today. Well, the number of casualties, of course, have increased. The latest figures we're looking at now are 100 Palestinians who died between last night and this morning because of Israeli rocket fire. Tell us what you're seeing on the ground. We do seem to be having problems reaching Scott. Oh, there he is. We do seem to have lost Scott Bob there. We'll try to reconnect with him before the end of the program. Let's move on now to investigations on the Malaysia flight MH17. We certainly haven't heard the last of that. A flight, of course, was shot down July 17th, just about 2 weeks ago, with the crisis in Ukraine still on. Still clearly related to what happened to that plane. Now, at the moment, the EU has adopted new economic sanctions against Russia over the conflict in Ukraine, targeting the oil sector, defense equipment, and sensitive technologies, according to the EU. And the aim of doing this is to increase the cost to Russia of its continued support for pro-Moscow rebels hiding and perpetrating violence in eastern Ukraine. And Moscow denies charges by the EU and the US that it is supplying heavy weapons to the rebels, but an international team has again failed to gain access to the crash site in eastern Ukraine because of heavy fighting between government forces and the rebels there. This is the third attempt in many days at the team, which includes Dutch and Australian police officers, has had to abandon attempts to reach the site. Many of the 298 people traveling aboard that ill-fated flight died when it crashed on July 17th. Let's head on to China now, where a former security chief, Zhu Yongkang, is being investigated for suspected serious disciplinary violation. The news confirms rumors about the hugely powerful former minister who has not been seen in public for months. Mr. Zhu headed China's Ministry of Public Security and was a member of the top decision-making body, the Politburo Standing Committee. This move to target him is not a small one, as it will send shockwaves through the political elite. He is the most senior Chinese official to be investigated since the Gang of Four in the early 1980s. Zhu Yongkang retired in late 2012 as Xi Jinping took over from Hu Jintao as the Communist Party leader and China's president. Since the transition, Mr. Xi has introduced a wide-ranging crackdown on corruption within the party, warning graft could threaten the organization's very survival. And Scott rejoins us now to talk about what's happening in Gaza. Scott, great to see you. What can you see on the ground? What can you tell us about what's going on right now in Gaza?
Yes, well, I'm sorry, first of all, about communications. It's a bit dodgy here. Today was a day of relative calm after a night that Gazans was one of the worst that they've experienced since the conflict began 3 weeks ago. There was a lot of strikes, and a couple of mosques were hit, and the house officials here, but the day was relatively calm. And now, as night is falling, we're beginning to hear the drones again, and of course, everyone is nervously waiting to see if it's going to get explosions and fear.
Scott, one of the main concerns in Gaza, of course, is the ceasefire, which would allow people go out to shop for food, stockpile on provisions, and so on. Have you met any residents who've complained about not being able to stockpile over the last few days?
Well, people complain mostly about the uncertainty. So far, there have not been food shortages, but people are not spending like they usually do because they're afraid that their children can't go out. What's even more worrisome is time, and as a result, people cannot stop just to go out.
Now, unfortunately, we'll have to discontinue that interview with Scott. Much as we tried, we understand the internet is a bit shaky where he is. Scott Bob is with the VOA. He is at the Gaza Strip monitoring the situation there for us. We move on now to the United Kingdom, where there's been a huge change, though, concerning EU migrants. In the UK, UK has decided to halve to 3 months the time EU migrants without realistic job prospects can claim benefits